Welcome to the Creature Cast, the official Console Creatures podcast. I'm your host today, Steve Egvar, and alongside me, returning at long last, my good pal Dave. How the heck are you today?
I am heck pretty good. It's been a long few weeks.
Yeah,
Sleep has not really been an option, but I'm still happy that I'm able to come back as many times as I can. We got some good games to talk about that we have been going through for the last little while, and that's what really matters. It's all good, playing some good stuff, and yeah, life goes on, man. Life goes on. I just want to try and get on here as many times as I can and talk games and just little guy's doing okay. He's
that's
just in
good.
a bit of a weird sleep regression type thing that anyone with a newborn knows what it's like in the first at least 6 months. And he's
I've heard
sort of
of
hit.
this. I've heard that they're very picky on not wanting to sleep, not wanting
It's
you
good
to
for a bit.
sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good for a bit. And then it gets bad. And then it gets good. And then it gets bad. Anyways, he's kind of hit that first cycle a little bit early because he's less than 4 months old still. And
Mhm.
he usually that doesn't typically, quote unquote, typically happen until around that time. We're just sort of dealing with that and trying to manage it, but he's healthy. Otherwise, everything's okay. It's just a matter of sort of, managing time and energy and those types of things. I just had my afternoon coffee, which is usually number 2 or 3 for the day.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stay hydrated, and maybe on his next nap, I'll nap with him. I don't know. We'll see.
I think that's the best part about being a parent in those first months is like, you know what? I'm going to nap now. I'm
Yeah.
going
Oh,
I'm
you
going
want to
to
sleep?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm going to do that
Sounds
too. Oh, yeah.
great. Team sleep time. Team sleep.
Exactly, yeah. It makes up for the long nights or the early mornings, whichever.
Or both.
Yeah,
Both. Yeah, no, it's definitely both. And it depends. Every kid's different, right? Like all the answers, you can talk to nurses, doctors, friends of yours, whatever, your parents, your in-laws, like whatever it might be, and just be like, hey, what did you do? Or hey, what about
right.
this? What about that? Oh, well, I did this with you, or I did this with our kid, or whatever. But they're always follow it up with, but every kid's different. And it's true. It's just how it goes.
Yeah.
But thankfully, with a Steam Deck and with a few hours here and there every week that I get a chance to sit down and play something for a stretch. Games have still been a part of my life, so I'm still playing even though all this stuff is going on. So
Love it,
yeah,
love it.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, that's exactly why you're here because we have been playing some
Indeed.
really cool games, and without further ado, we brought the Diablo dudes back together after
That's
after a
right.
year. We are back together here for Diablo 4: The Vessel of Hatred expansion. Something I've been looking forward to for a long, long time. I know, Dave, you also share in your love of everything Diablo. And yeah,
Yeah,
we've both been playing it. You a little more than I had a chance to because I had some complications getting into the the preview build and everything like that. So my time with the expansion was a little bit more limited. But that being said, I was able to kind of dip my toe into all corners of the expansion, get a chance to
yeah,
try out, experience the new narrative, experience the new class that's available, and some of the more like supplemental stuff like that. But I know behind the scenes you've been playing it a lot more aggressively during your time. So I want to pass the buck off to you. How are you feeling about this expansion? Are you happy that we've got something like a full blown story expansion? Is this something that you can see yourself coming back to for Diablo now?
yeah. So I want to like sort of preface a little bit of my feelings with it. With there we go. Hopefully, I muted that. I muted that cough
That
there.
was good. That was good. That was quick. That was a quick draw. I saw that.
Pro,
Yeah.
everybody, pro. I still got it. I still got my wits about me. No, so I think that yeah, I want to preface this a little bit by saying what's interesting about this is that it's an expansion, and there's somehow just the phrasing of that and the way that Blizzard has sort of been describing it is that is different than quote unquote DLC,
Mhm.
than like tradition what has been known now as DLC, which is often or could be often new characters, skins, maybe an extra stage here and there, a boss rush type of thing in the particular kind of game. All fine, totally. There's nothing wrong with that, right? If that's the
Mhm.
approach you're taking, that's great. As long as the content is good and it improves the game, awesome. But there's something about an expansion and it being attached to Blizzard that feels like it's something different
Yep.
because that's what an expansion has always been in my mind. Like they set the example growing up as to what an expansion is. And that starts with Warcraft 2 for me. and then goes into Diablo 2, and then goes into StarCraft. I didn't really play the sort of added story things in StarCraft 2. I think I only played the first base. Those were sort of expansions, but it was always laid out in 3 different stages of
Yes.
each uh, race or class. I can't remember
Mhm.
how they phrase them. But Blizzard always had expansions. WoW is a perfect example. There's an expansion every couple years, and it is a massive event
It's a
all the
moment
time.
that
It's
fans
a
are like,
moment.
"Okay, lock it
Yeah,
in. Everyone's jumping on. It's expansion time. We're
exactly.
grinding out this game." Exactly,
Yeah,
yeah, and this
and
has
it
been the
has us.
case for 20 years, 25 years, if that,
Well, 20 years for WoW. So
Yeah,
now at this point, right? Which is
yeah,
insane to think about. The fact that I've only put like 5 hours in total ever in WoW in 20
same,
years
same.
is kind of
It's a
we're
mark of
losing our
pride
gamer
for
card.
me. No,
Oh,
it's a
okay. Oh,
mark of
it's a
pride
pride.
for me, where I'm like, I went out on top. I dipped my toe in. I didn't get the itch. It didn't take me in like a heroin addict.
Yeah.
I walked away. I got out scot-free.
I will say though, to our advantage here, our wallets are a little bit fatter because of that. So there's that too, because it just
A
ends
little
up
bit, yeah,
costing lots
yeah.
lots of money.
I
A
spent
little
it
bit. I
on
mean,
other things, yeah.
other things, of course. Yeah, coffee, candy, typical.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways, I want to say that because I do think that sort of frames how I went into this.
Mhm.
I think like hearing at first, like roughly a year ago, or was it even on launch that there was an expansion coming for
Yes.
Diablo 4
Yeah.
was kind of like, oh, so that's probably going to be more substantial than I would have assumed from other games, and maybe it's not fair to compare, and that's total, I can understand that, but I do think that there was a difference there going into it. So I was sort of expecting a decent amount of content here, whether it was loot drops, whether it was the class. I kind of suspected. I mean, I knew that there was going to be some, story progression and expansion here because they've been going and really touting the fact that story has been super important in Diablo 4 from the beginning.
Mhm.
And I do think that it's a little bit more fleshed out compared to 3 and 2 were, at least in the base game. In my opinion, it was anyway.
I agree.
And I think we talked about that sort of on launch for our review and stuff as well. But all of that being said, I think they put a lot of work into it, and there is a shit ton of content here. It is a lot of stuff. And I do think that, yes, it is 30 or 40 bucks, whatever it is, if you buy it separate, that wasn't part of an ultimate edition or whatever. That money, like, I don't always want to equate content to what things cost, but
Sure.
if you're worried that, oh my God, I have to pay an extra $30 after I spent 80, 90, $100 before, there's a lot here, and they could ask for more because I think they put a lot of stuff in this, and they didn't just add story, they didn't just add a class, they reintroduced systems from previous games. They added a lot of post game content, which I wish I got more of, but
Yeah.
time is a factor, obviously. And they've changed stuff in the base game that will be changed without actually needing the expansion, even if you don't have it. So a lot of work went into this. Ultimately, we'll get into details, but ultimately, I think it's a really, really good expansion, really, really good content. This is like a no-brainer if you're already a Diablo 4 fan, I think.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you, and I think that endpoint is exactly how I'm feeling, is that with everything that Vessel of Hatred introduces and knowing all the stuff that the Season of Hatred Rising is going to introduce for all players across the board, whether or not you buy into this expansion or not, I think right now this feels like the best kind of year 2 Diablo 4
Mm,
could have, where especially
mhm.
after season 4 with the Loot Reborn, I feel like Diablo is now in the best state it's ever been.
Yeah.
Even since launch, I feel like at launch, it was a good game. I enjoyed my time with it. I put in 50, 60 hours into it, but I was like, okay, there's a lot of room to improvement. It wasn't until season 4 that I was like, oh, they're maximizing the potential of this. And now we're getting into a point where it's like, now let's build off that potential. Let's actually like flesh out some systems, add in new details here, expand on everything that's in the game. And right now, I think that, yeah, if you're someone who played through the base game and you're like, okay, that was enough, or someone who was like me and kind of went through season 1, got all the content I needed there, didn't touch season 2 or 3, came back for 4, didn't touch 5. Now I'm back in. I'm feeling that itch once again where I'm like, okay, it's not only just that seasonal grind where I'm like, okay, I'm down for a nice meaty battle pass, new systems and stuff like that. The story, and I'm huge into the Diablo story, the lore and everything. Just from that first cutscene that we saw, back at the Microsoft conference earlier this year, I was like, "Oh, we're in for a treat from Blizzard," because they're popping
Yeah.
off, and that just keeps going on throughout the expansion, where it's not just like, "Okay, here you go," because all of the seasons kind of introduce story elements to kind of tangentially take you through, and here's why this new game system's in here. This is why you're doing the
Yeah. Yeah.
blah blah blah. It's like, okay, that's cool. This is like an actual story. This is actually like Blizzard firing on all cylinders. Once you
It's a
reach it,
continuation from the base game. It's not
exactly.
one of those sort of side. It sounds like a derogatory way of explaining. It's not a side quest story. It
It's
is
not
a
supplemental. Yeah.
supplemental. There you go. What if I'm so tired. Um, it is a direct continuation from where the final battle and moments happened in the base game, and for the better. I think it's a great way to keep it going, or a great
E
idea to keep that part going.
exactly, and because, I mean, when you play the base game and Nirel went off with the Mephisto Soul Stone, it's like, "Oh, shit, we're
Mhm.
gonna get a conclusion to this, or at least a continuation of this narrative at some point down the line." And just following that here, it's so much fun to go through. Like,
Yeah,
going back with
yeah,
these characters, very is a lot of very new characters, seeing where the, uh, Cathedral of Light is after the
right.
Battle of Hell and everything, I was like, "Oh my god, this is, like, brilliant writing, brilliant, like, set design and stuff like that." I was, like, all in throughout the
Yeah,
entire experience.
I agree. I think I went through the entire. I was able to get through the entire campaign of
Yep.
a Self Hatred. So that's good. It does take some time. It's not one of those like, hey, sit down and do it in a couple hours. Like
No.
it's going to take you some time. You're going to need to level up a little bit and kind of get yourself through it, because there were some bosses I ran into where I was like, ooh, I don't think my gear is ready for this yet. I got to go back and do, some hell ties or something like that. So that does it is sort, you could call it a grind, but at least those things that used to be like the way to keep the game going, like a hell tide, for example,
Mhm.
is really just an added thing now. And though that content, maybe, post game and late game and stuff, you'll return to those a lot more. But if you want to go through the campaign, you can do those a couple times. You'll get a bit more loot. You can go back to Tree of Whispers and unlock some, legendaries and things like that. And then you're probably okay. So that's, a couple hours or a few hours or whatever. You go back to it, you tackle that dungeon, and the story keeps going and stuff. And I think that is a good loop. I think it feels like the uh, the grind, so to speak, is not forced. I still felt like, okay, there's a reason for me to need to do this. I'm just not quite ready to tackle that boss in this dungeon as a part of this particular part of the story. And
Yeah.
I found that it felt okay to me. It didn't feel like it was forcing me to do something, and I would just be bored or tired for being pulled away from it.
I totally agree with you. There are a couple, like, stopgaps almost where you reach a dungeon and it's like, "Nuh-uh, Sonny,
Yeah.
you're way underleveled for this." And I kind of respect a game,
Even though it scales, even though it scales, it's still harder.
but I respect games that actively do that, where
Yeah.
I kind of gotten bored of the whole, "We're gonna give you a leveling system, we're gonna give you a scaling system," but all you have to do is just play the game and you'll get from the start to the finish without having to real you can just mainline the entire thing. I like a game like Diablo that's like, "No, actually, you gotta go do some of the side stuff, otherwise you're not progressing here." Or
Yeah.
in a game like Diablo, or you're gonna have to get a group of friends, you're gonna have to, get 4 people all together and stuff like that, which
And
I
there's a fine line there,
yeah,
right? Because it can just be the games that are built around, oh, you need to grind, and
right.
that's not my thing. I don't like that. I don't like having certain RPGs, for example, that are, a certain style, or a lot of them are old school and, sort of retro at this point, where it's like, no, that's just how the game's built. You can get to a certain point, and then you got to backtrack, and you got to spend 4 to 6 hours grinding, and you're doing the
Mhm.
same thing over and I don't find that rewarding. I just find that to be a waste of time a lot of the time, and I just don't have time anymore. So no one does the older they get,
Yep.
kid or not. You just have less and less time the older you get. So that's just how it is. But so all the things that you mentioned, like all the seasons, for example, the supplemental content, as you say, as you so elegantly said, those those things are all still in the game,
Mhm.
right? And you can go to those areas, you can go to that content, or at least the vast majority of them are. And that just has built upon what you can do in order to level yourself up, in order to collect more loot and everything. So you don't actually have to just do like I did Hell Tides. I find them kind of fun. They're a limited time
Same.
thing.
Yeah.
Like those things to me have always kind of been kind of cool, and that's been there since the base game. That's just there as an example of one thing, but there's like 4 or 5 different ways you can do it. You can tackle the like dozens of dungeons they have, like whatever, right? All of that stuff will help, and then you'll continue the story. And I do think, going back to us talking about the story itself, without spoiling anything for sure,
Right.
the story is interesting, rewarding, and I do think the new characters are pretty cool as well. And a lot of them are active with you,
Right.
which
Yeah.
I happened a little bit in the base game, but not in this way. Like I think there's a couple of characters that come with you that aren't part of the mercenary system, which we'll get to too,
Mm.
that still help you.
Yep.
Is it Eru? Is that the guy's name?
Eru, yeah.
Eru, yeah.
Yeah.
That guy's with you like 5, 6 times, and he's got like crazy cool skills, and you're like, have things are exploding around you that aren't even
Yep.
part of your skill set and stuff. Like this is awesome, but he's an active character as part of this new part of the story, and he's in the new area and everything. Like doing that extra work to get to the next part of the story content is worth it for those reasons as well, not just because you want to tackle a new dungeon. Like it is the story part of it. I think for me the campaign is in a good place.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and without spoiling, I think by the end of it, it's like, okay, I'm back to I want the next one. I
Yeah,
want a release date because I'm interested to see where we go here because I've got questions and I want answers. And I think
yeah.
that's another great example of why Blizzard is Blizzard is because it has a world, it has characters, it knows how to flesh them out, and by the end of it, you're like, okay, I'm ready for more, and that's the little carrot at the end of the
Yeah,
stick, you know?
yeah, I'm interested to see sort of with the last, I guess it's been 5 seasons. 6 will be the one when as the game launches, or as the expansion launches. Those that extra content, I'm wondering what the extra content will be for these next set of seasons, or for this next,
Yes.
let's say 14 months or whatever it ends up being, that the next like massive expansion piece comes out. Because the developers have said from the beginning, this is going to be a game that's going to continue. It's going to
Mhm.
have likely multiple expansions. The way that this ends, even if it ended in a different way, there's probably going to be more, and it's going to continue the story and all this kind of stuff. So it's cool. It's taking Sanctuary, it's taking the characters into cool places, and part of the cool places and part of the experience is the class. I think that's a big thing we have to talk about
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
Is the class. So I exclusively played the new class because I was like,
Me
I don't
too.
have time to mess around with old ones. I'm gonna play the new one, see what it feels like, and just stick with it. And
Yeah.
overall, I find it to be a lot of fun. I don't know about you.
I found it to become a lot of fun.
Okay,
I thought
explain.
probably so thankfully because of Loot Reborn, the leveling system is way better. I find myself like
Right.
leveling at like a pretty rapid pace. Thanks
Oh,
to the new
part of yeah, sorry. Part
yeah,
of
no,
that
no.
is the fact that I think this is introduced now in the expansion,
Yes.
is that the level cap is 60.
Right.
So those middle set of levels, sort of like 30, 40 range or something, go a little bit faster than they used to because you have an extra 10 levels to make up and stuff. So that's part of why things might feel a little
Yep.
bit more that they're turning over. You're getting skills a little bit more instantly. Anyways,
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I
no, no.
forgot about that
Well,
before, and I was like, oh yeah, the extra 10 levels. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
we
Okay.
can talk about that because there are some like quality of life changes that affect
Yes. Yep.
everyone, whether you're a Vessel of Hatred player or not. But
Yeah.
yeah, for Spiritborn, the new class, I like the concept of it. I like that it's kind of this mix between martial artist and it can
And
summon
Druid,
like
I
and kind of
find.
druid. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of necromancer and druid coded in a lot of ways. With the ability to like summon, like throwables and long ranged attacks and stuff like that. But then also, giant poisonous centipede that comes out of the earth and everything. It's got some really cool movesets and combinations that you can use, whether or not you want it to be like a defensive class, a long
Mhm.
range, a poison class. I think it has a good robust set of skills. It took me until probably around level 20, level 30 before I was like, "Oh, I'm having fun." Before it kind of just felt
Okay.
very, very muddy, very like again, this all comes from brand new class. I have no resources to go online and be like, okay, what's the optimized build and stuff like that, which I usually do for every season. I'm like, what's the meta? What am I doing here? Here, I'm kind of just I'm raw dogging it. I'm just kind of going in and just figuring it out as I go. And I'm like, am I making the right mistake? Am I making mistakes? Am I putting my skill allotments into the right attacks? I'm just kind of basing everything on, does it look cool and does
Feel.
it, yeah, exactly, it's look and feel. And
Yeah.
it took me a while for it to actually like click, and I'm like, okay, I kind of now understand the character. So I don't know if that's just by the level design or if it's just it's something new and exciting and I just don't really know how to approach it.
Yeah. So I'm sort of I have a little bit of that in my approach to these types of games and to this particular um, game and this
Yeah.
particular class. Like for me, and I put this in my review as well at Console Creatures, is that for me, when I approach games like this, I don't look for builds. I just want to play. I want to experiment. I find it
Mm.
fun not knowing what works. I want to feel out what works for me because there's multiple, like especially with a class like this where you have a gorilla build, which is kind of like tank-ish and like barriers and stuff. Like you mentioned, the centipede and poison, and
Yep.
what's one of them is the jaguar, which is sort of like fast and like aggressive and could have like fire abilities, that type of like there's five different things you can choose or six different things you could choose. You can mix and match and whatever. Which one works for me? Let's just see how they feel. And I respect, I think, like three times. And I
Interesting. Yeah.
ended up finding sort of like a middle ground where I was like half gorilla, half it's probably jaguar one. So like a little bit more of like beefy with the gorilla stuff that gave me barriers and
Right.
dodge and things like that. And then the jaguar one was like, strong, aggressive, fast attacks.
Yeah.
Like that's so I sort of had like is that the optimal build? Probably not, but I
I
had
don't know.
fun with it, so I don't give a shit, right?
Sure.
I that's what I like. I like doing that. And if I find one that really like eventually maybe in the next season or I start another character and I can do an optimized one, but I find that exploration and that journey to get to that point a lot of fun. So that's usually my approach. And that's what I did this time and I found it to be pretty cool. But I did also feel I was having fun, but I felt very underpowered in those
Yep.
first, let's say 20, 25 levels, maybe 30
Yep.
even.
Yep.
Um, I got very few, and these are things that obviously can be tweaked and likely will be. There's going to be day one patches and probably day two and day 7 and day 35. Like it's going to be patches, whatever, right? In this particular build or in my particular run through of the game and the expansion, I found very few usable weapons until I got into those, 25 level 25 to 30. So it's not just the abilities I was picking that maybe not be crazy optimized in this build, but I also just didn't get great drops for my weapons. So my
I agree.
attack, or part of my attack at least, didn't feel like it was strong enough. So I was surviving, I was getting through things, but it took me longer. Like some of the smallest demons, I was like, why is this taking me like my entire skill tree or my entire board at the bottom and they're still not falling over? I don't understand. Like what
Yep.
is that? There's no way this is the way it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? And I played it on the hard difficulty. I stayed out of like torment and things like that because I
Mhm.
just wanted to make sure I got through some of the content and stuff. And it's not that hard. It's just why did I feel so weak at the beginning? And eventually I was fine. I got some skills, I got some cool legendaries that helped me. Um, but I had a somewhat similar feeling at the beginning, or at least for the
Yeah.
first half or
A-
something. So
and to your point, I think that can all be addressed hopefully, during this early preview and review period. A lot of this feedback can go to Blizzard. They can optimize and change things, and then hopefully
yeah.
by the time launch comes, or even within launch week, all of that is taken into consideration. They can kind of
Yeah.
rescale Spiritborn because right now I do like it. I think it has a lot of potential. I think I generally like it more than kind of some of the core classes that are in the game.
Yeah,
I
me
just
too.
don't
Me
know if
too.
I'm ever going to be like, wow, Spiritborn my favorite over Barbarian or Necromancer. I'm still unsure, but it has potential, and I'm very curious to see what kind of, again, going back to my play style, is like I'm curious to know what kind of builds come out of it towards like
Mhm.
end game, because that, for me, that's what it's all about. It's about optimizing a class all the way through from 50 or now 60 to end game,
Yeah.
and getting all your Paragon boards and stuff like that maxed
Yeah,
out.
that's different, right? That at that point, I will try to kind of get into those grooves a little bit more. I may not do it perfectly because I still like experimenting, but like to me, it's fun to respec and just see what things feel like for a couple
Sure.
hours, and then
Yeah.
do it costs you some gold, but so what? Gold's dropping like crazy. Which, by the way, the gold gets picked up by a little pet now.
I love it.
There's pets. There's
Oh
pets,
yeah.
everybody.
I went with a
I
little
don't
kitty
know if that
cat.
was in was that was new, right? That's not in the last couple seasons. I don't. I
Yeah,
think
no,
that's
the
brand new.
pet's new.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it kind of tells you. Yeah, so you got a little cat or a dog sort of walking around and stuff. So, um, it's that's kind of cool because they could like pick
I
up
love
stuff
it.
that
Yeah.
you don't even need to go and pick up anymore. So, um, I'll say one thing about the Spiritborn is that if you like the monk in Diablo 3, um, or even the witch doctor. I mean, witch doctor is very slow, but the monk jumped around a lot, had a lot of
Mhm.
obviously martial arts because that's sort of like the theme of those two classes mixed together with a druid is kind of what the Spearborn feels like. It's sort of a mash of all three of those I found. And
Mhm.
I think that's kind of cool. I really liked, I used the monk a lot in 3. That was probably my favorite class in that game, that and the wizard. So if you like that sort of speedy, but also using elementals at the same time, you'll probably get a taste of that within this class. And I found some pretty cool, interesting looking and feeling skills as well. I don't know if you like had particular. Did you have a particular build? Because I kind of said what I did.
So I did like a hybrid between the eagle build and centipede.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I
So we
I
went like the
The
opposite
complete
directions.
opposite. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love the
that's cool.
long range of the eagle, guardian, and then the centipede is just all like poison based stuff. So I
Poison.
was saying from
Yeah.
like afar, and then just one of my favorite like little combination is there's a whirlwind attack that just kind of like pulls all the enemies together, and then I
Yes.
shoot the centipede up, and it just kind of obliterates everyone within like one foul swoop. But then,
Yeah. I had that centipede. It's poison where it comes out of the ground and everyone
yeah.
around you gets. I used that one as well. That was one of my skills. And then I had this. I got to remember what the thing is on my item, but I also had it in the base game as well. It's like volatile blood or something like that, where if you kill uh enemies that were killed by like your core skill or one of the skills, something like that, they drop a set of like exploding
Oh, true. Yeah.
blood balls or something
Yep.
like that, and when you run into them they just explode all around you. That is the strongest like piece of anything on any equipment I find, because I'll poison everybody and then they'll die from the poison, or I'll kill them while they're still poisoned. And then there's just red drops everywhere. And all I have to do is run in circles
Mhm.
and everyone around me just falls because it just explodes, because it does like 150 something damage of what was applied to them when they died. And it just gets multiplied to everybody around. So it can just go hundreds and hundreds of percentage around it. And like elites are dropping in like 2 seconds. And I'm only running in circles. And
See,
I was
and
like,
isn't
this
that
is
the best part of Diablo is like
it's
anytime that the
great.
game can give you the opportunity to just see numbers and big flashes and stuff pop up on the screen, that to me is like a dopamine hit. Anytime that I'm
Yeah.
just causing mass chaos on the screen in the coolest way possible, I'm like, this is Diablo and this is exactly what I want. And I think Vessel of Hatred does that once again.
Yeah, and I do think actually a lot of the sort of like mobs of enemies and hordes of enemies and stuff, it feels like there's more big ones, if that makes sense. Like it feels
Yeah.
like there's just more enemies swarming you. And that also gave me more opportunity to run into more of those the vile blood balls and then just explode everywhere because there was just more of them popping off. So yeah, I think Vessel of Hatred does a lot of that. And a lot of different opportunities in the dungeons and the new area, Nahatu. I got to get the name right of what it
Yeah,
is.
it's
The new region.
Diablo
What's the other
fans, we've
ones?
been there before.
Not Nahanto. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um,
Yeah,
Have we? Why
yeah,
did I how did I miss
in,
that?
Diablo 2, we go to Kurest, and,
Yeah.
that's part of it. The Without spoiling anything, the major room that you go into and find someone, you've been in that room before.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Because
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, this feels like act 3 or
3.
4, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it
yeah.
is."
Yep.
Yeah, of
Yep.
Diablo 2. I mean, it's like, "Oh, this is," but I didn't recognize the name, and I guess it's not completely that. It's not exactly that, but it's
It's
linked to it.
referenced, but it's linked to it.
Yeah.
It's an area that we've never fully explored except
Right.
for, and
That
I can't remember, it's
one
like
spot.
Travernal or something.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that spot you do go to in Diablo 2. So, like, as soon as I heard that, I was like, "Whoa, this is cool." Because Diablo 2 in so many ways does pull from, or Diablo 4 pulls from Diablo 2 in so many different ways that it almost
Which
feels
is
like it's
great.
the
Which is great.
sister product of it, and I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
It's nostalgic, but it feels earned, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah, and you know what? If anyone doesn't sort of remember or recognize the names or whatever, Act 3 in Diablo 2 is sort of like, and this new area that is introduced here in the expansion is like a jungle like
Yeah,
area.
jungle,
Um,
swampy, yeah,
yeah, so things are a little bit, and there was like a swamp area. I don't remember exactly what it's called. There's a swamp area on the map in the base game of Diablo 4. It's a little bit more like brown toned and more like muddy and stuff. This
yeah.
is brings a lot more color. It's green and
It's
has
beautiful.
sort of, it's
Yep,
really really cool. The
yep,
dungeons are interesting as well.
very,
So
yep,
I think that also brings things to it. Is that Diablo is supposed to be a dark game, and yes, things are still dark, like literally dark.
yep.
But the added new area that isn't a desert basically, or isn't a brown swamp or a snowy hill, which is pretty much all of what the base game was, generally speaking. This is cool that this is added to it, and it's just another section at the bottom of the map. And I found it fun every time we return to it as
Me
part
as
of
well.
the
D
expansion.
Did it throw you off that it was just part of Sanctuary? Like,
It's like, oh, suddenly everything's green.
that I had a visceral reaction to it. It was like, I popped up the map screen. I was like, "Oh, it's literally just
It's a
down the
path.
road. It's down the road." I was like, "So
It's
we
down the
just
road.
never decided, hey, we should go down here." Because this entire time I was like, "Man, we're going to a new island. We're going to, like, we're gonna have to, like, go on a boat and go somewhere." No, it's literally a 5-minute walk
Steve wanted to
from
be on a
areas.
boat with his flippy floppies, and
Oh my
he
goodness.
didn't quite
I
get it. It
didn't
was
get it. No,
there was a
I literally
bridge.
just
There was
had
a
to.
bridge that was torn down. That was pretty much
That's
what
so
it seemed it
true. Yeah,
was.
yeah.
That's what it was at
That's
one
the
point,
set.
which is also really cool seeing one when you see what happens before you get to that bridge, and then when you actually get to that bridge as your character, like a couple cutscenes later. All of that stuff was really cool with
It's
the story. I
so
love the way
cool.
that played out. A
Yep.
couple new characters come in. What happens with you know who
Yep.
and on her on their boat, like that is crazy
It's
crazy
so
cool. I thought
cool.
that,
Yeah.
and dark as hell, which is exactly what it's supposed to be. um what else I was gonna say? Oh, the other thing is, one thing I want to mention, I teased it before, maybe I'm jumping ahead to where you
No.
wanted to go,
No,
but
no.
mercenaries.
Yeah, I wanted to talk
uh
about this next. Yeah.
yeah, mercenary system, I teased it a little bit earlier. This is essentially an extra person or an extra character that's going to fight alongside you. um, I only played solo. I think it was just simpler to do that in this build. You could have matched up with friends and stuff like that, but basically, it felt like I wasn't playing solo because I had an NPC with me
Yeah.
fighting alongside. That's basically what it is. They have their own set of abilities. They have their own skill tree. There are 4 different ones. One of them is constantly active and physically beside you, and another one can, which is I found a super interesting way of implementing the second one, is that they can enhance one of your abilities
Yep.
on your skill bar. So that's really cool, and they can be interchanged at any time on the fly as long as you've unlocked them and rescued them, so to speak. Right? Um, I think this was really cool. I do think that sometimes it saved me on really difficult fights, so I
Mm.
do think that they make a difference. In my experience, those times that I felt a little bit underpowered, I had the first guy that you find. I don't have their names exactly in front of me. Sort of has the shield, and he's kind of like the hero of the town he's from, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just kept him as my active guy because he had like a bubble shield around me. Sometimes he gave me some extra speed and things like that. Like they have their own builds. They have like 2 or 3 different directions you can go in their skill tree, and you can interchange them anytime you want. I thought it was really cool. I don't know what your experience was with it.
I like it. It's interesting enough. I just it feels underbaked in some way because I feel like
Mhm.
it's specifically there for people who want to play solo, which, hey, if that's your desire to play Diablo, totally. This is just not a game that I have any inclination to really play by myself. I usually play with others. I try to get like anyone that's on board. I'm like, okay, let's play, only because it feels more like a party game. So it to me, it
Yeah.
just kind of felt like they put a lot of emphasis on supplying solo players with more options, which is great, but I never felt incentivized enough to be like, I'm going to max out this specific mercenary to complement my build in this way. Again, going back to the deeper layer of, okay, I'm reaching end game. How am I going to really optimize my character, my build, all these stats and everything? I
Right.
just feel like incorporating a mercenary and doing all that, building the rapport, leveling that up, doing the barter system with them and everything in the hopes to get better legendary equipment and everything. I'm just like, is this busy work, or is this something that for me, I'm going to want to be incentivized to use all throughout the expansion, all throughout the season? Or am I just gonna be like, "Well, I've got 3 other people in my party. Why do I care about you?"
Yeah.
Also, with
Yeah.
the one that you can assign to the specific ability, there was
Yeah.
a about 75% chance that they just never appeared. And I was like, "Well, I'm
Well,
not
they're on
using you."
cooldown. They have a cooldown.
I'm just
Yeah,
talking in general, like, I'm saying
oh,
just
really?
in general, yeah,
Like it didn't work. It didn't hit or whatever.
no, and I thought it might have been
Ah,
like there was like a back end like roll system where maybe they just don't appear if you hit the ability, but like I was
right.
steadily going through, and then at a certain point I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go to, and it starts with an R. I can't remember his name, but he's the active member. I was like, I'm just gonna stick with you
He
because I
was
know that you're always here, and I don't
yeah,
have to
he's,
really worry
so
about it.
that was okay, that was the secondary, person you're saying, like,
Yes.
wasn't yeah, so for me, I had the big shield bearer guy that you're just talking about active
Yep.
pretty much the entire time. I don't know, he worked for me. Um, and then I had the kid as my secondary. I don't know if you
Okay.
ran into the kid, like, he was
No.
so, each one has their own little, like, area where you find them, and then they
A little
join your
story
little
around them. Yeah.
story, they join your party kind of thing. Anyways, there's a kid. I'm not going to describe exactly what he does or sorry, exactly what he is, but like what his story is or whatever. But one of his things was I added him to one of my abilities where it basically made my direct contact or direct hit ability um sort of have like a splash damage around it.
Mhm.
And every time that splash damage or any of my damage killed someone, it just kept that timer of that
Right.
ability going. So if there was a lot of small guys around me, I just launched it and it just kept going and going and going. And by the time I was able to hit it again, the cooldown reset
Mhm.
completely. And I just kept it active all the time. Maybe I was just hitting the button so many times I didn't realize it didn't pop off, but for me, it seemed to work every time,
Okay.
unless for some reason I, let that cooldown go, or actually the counter was still going. So,
Right.
um, in my experience, I'm playing a lot solo because I'm just playing at odd times.
Yeah.
I like playing with friends. I think you're right. This game is great with a party of anywhere between 2 to 4 people. I think
Mhm.
that a lot of the difficult battles that I think we've talked about would be a lot easier, I think, or more interesting at some points if you played with a party of even just 2 people. It would be cool to kind of combine your abilities and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yep.
as someone who plays a lot of solo, probably plays 80% of this game, 75% of this game solo, I think it's a good addition. I do agree though that like maybe they could go a little bit more, a little deeper with it, but there's only so much they can probably do as far as like, oh, this is when this ability needs to go. This is when this because they don't always activate at the exact right time, right? Sometimes it's
Right.
just, oh, hey, that cooldown's done, the fight is still going. But oh, it'd be nice if you held on to that for an extra 10 seconds so I can
Yep.
combine it with mine. There's really no way to kind of do that. It'd be really hard to sort of to program all that. I think that would be super difficult. So I don't hold that against them, but that's the disadvantage of not communicating with someone and playing in a party is
That's
that
true.
this is the alternative, right? At least it's an alternative. And I think that at least there's something there. They'll probably add more mercenaries. Maybe skill
Yeah.
trees will get bigger, things like that. Like there's only 4. They'll probably do 5, 6, something like that is my guess eventually. Um, but for the most part, I enjoyed it for myself, for my
No, that's
playthrough.
great.
So
That's great. And
yeah,
hopefully I'm wrong and maybe it just takes more time to really get acclimated to the system and really get into the nitty-gritty of how can this complement my play style,
yeah,
especially in the end game, because that's really where my target is getting through the expansion, getting to the end game, getting to the seasonal content. How are all of these systems going to complement my time here?
yeah. And there's extra things you can do to sort of get their rapport or quote unquote level them up and things
Yep.
like that. Like I kind of just had them with me and just played, and they just leveled up as they went. And that's kind of, I didn't do really anything extra. I was like, I want to get through some of the more other content and stuff, and some of the other content.
Yeah.
Haha, segues, everybody.
Love it.
Did you try to tackle a realm walker? Because
Yeah.
that's a big addition.
And that is crazy.
It is like, if anyone's done a world boss, like, okay, so the difference with our build and us playing this over the last, let's say, a week or 10 days, or that we've
Yeah.
had available to us, roughly a week, is that, there's only limited amount of people online. You pretty much have to match up, party up with someone in order to have someone with you.
Yep.
For me, my experience, that's totally fine. There's people online, I see them walking around the map. I'm just going to play solo anyway, whatever, right? World bosses, you would go to them, the event would be active, and then there'd be like 15 other people with you. They're so overpowered, they're maximized, they've
Oh
they've
my
done the
god.
metagame thing, and
Yep.
they crash in like 3 minutes kind of thing, right? kind of
Uh,
felt
yeah.
kind of felt like, okay, they're not as substantial as they probably wanted them to be at a certain point, because they can be tackled so easily at some. That's my impression of what they became. I don't know
That's
about
so
you.
true. And no, no, and totally because they are these ginormous monstrosities. They come out
Hmm.
and everything. But to me, it's almost super comical and super rewarding when it's either you or someone in the group and everything, like not your party, but like someone in the area that's just able to take one of these guys down in 2 seconds. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is exactly what I want. I want numbers and flashes flashing on my screen. And this is
Health
Diablo.
bars to disappear, like,
Exactly. Like
basically.
there's nothing more rewarding than like, revving up for a world boss or anything like that, or like an Uber boss and stuff like that. And it just drops dead. And you're like, all
Yeah.
right, give me the rewards. I'm out of here. See ya.
Yeah, and I will say I've always thought that they were very well done. Like, they
Yep.
look cool. It's interesting that the perspective, zooms out and stuff. Real, I thought the whole presentation of it has always been really cool.
Yep.
Now, the Realm Walker is just a kind of another world boss, but like on multiple levels,
Right.
with multiple stages. It kind of literally goes through multiple different stages. Did you complete one,
No.
or okay? So I did.
Okay.
I was like, I'm just gonna keep going.
Yeah.
Like, so this is the point where playing with other people, and probably when it triggers with other random people online and
Yep.
stuff, this is where this is really going to feel like, oh, this is a team effort, and you're going to be able to tackle this together. Because basically, the way it works, if you've played the world bosses before in Diablo 4, it's kind of like that, but this giant creature has a portal on its back or its head or something,
Mhm.
is constantly bringing in new enemies as you take it down. Its health bar is insanely huge. At least solo, it took like, I want to say it took me 90 minutes to do it from start to finish. Not
No.
just the Realm Walker, but the entire thing. The
Sure.
entire
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, just the Realm Walker itself was probably the majority of it.
That's insane.
It took forever. And I was like,
Yeah.
I want to see where it goes, because it says that if you defeat the Realm Walker, it will
You get the
open up a
portal. Yep.
portal to a new realm or whatever,
It's
right?
it's essentially like, the
Another dungeon.
dungeon to grind for loot. That's the loop in this whole season coming up. Yeah.
Exactly. And I was like, I want to see where this takes me. Like, literally, I want to see where it takes me. And that's exactly what it does. It took me, I don't even know how many deaths. I should have counted. So many deaths just to take the Realm Walker down. And I'm popping off all these things, and I'm dying a bunch of times. Oh, my durability is super low. Okay, I got to go repair all my shit, and back and forth and back. Luckily, it was spawned sort of close to a camp, so I didn't have to run far to get back to
Oh,
it.
okay.
So that was nice. which I didn't realize at the time until I died like 7 times. I honestly, I probably died 20 times just to take this thing down.
Yeah,
And then I went in the dungeon, and it feels like a regular dungeon, but there are way more elites. And then the final boss of it, if I'm not mistaken, had 4 bosses in one room that you had to defeat.
I love this.
And that took another I mean, I don't know if that's a random roll. I don't know how they did it in this build. And that took another sort of, half hour just to do that one room and stuff. Again, I'm doing it solo. I just have a mercenary with me.
Yep.
I think I mostly had my build that I was comfortable with at the time. Anyways, I think that with other people, whether it's a party of your own or you're playing with random people, the Realm Walker thing will be pretty cool. I don't know how quickly it's going to go down, just like world bosses did eventually, but right now I think it's a cool idea and it's an interesting way to sort of like continue the fight as
Yeah.
opposed to just saying, "Hey, here's a big thing, take it down, move on. Here's a big thing, take it down, go to a crazy ass dungeon." Kind of cool.
And to be honest, I feel like this might just become a world boss, which I'm kind of okay with because the first time
Probably
I
will.
saw a world boss in the preview build of Diablo 4 way back when, it felt like it was the
Yeah.
exact same feeling of like this
Yeah.
larger than life thing. I'm sitting there with the few amount of people who were also online at the time.
Mhm.
We're chipping away at this thing. Is taking, 45 minutes, or
No one's optimized that
no
kind of
one's
metagame
optimized and
kind of
everything
thing.
like
Yep.
that, and then, flash forward now a year, and people know exactly what to do. They know their optimized builds and everything, and these suckers are just
Yeah.
going down left, right, and center. So, I do
Yeah.
hope that it doesn't take 90 minutes only because, and correct me if I'm mistaken, but because this is supposed to be part of the loop and the grind for the season, they spawn every 15 minutes with one on every hour. That's supposed to be this, like, better one with better loot and everything like that. So I do hope that by the time we're hit end game, we're ready to take these suckers on. It is kind of fast because I want to get into the portal. I want to get into this dungeon,
Yeah.
get all
Yeah.
the treasure, get out, do another one, and keep grinding away at that. Because if it is, hey, I'm here for 45 minutes just to kill the boss and then get into the portal, it's like this is way too long of a commitment for me to want
I
to do this
don't
more than
think
once with
so because
friends.
I did feel like because when you're getting swarmed by a bunch of enemies, like smaller ones that it's spawning on you, you are spending a decent amount of effort just trying to keep them off your back, kind
Right.
of thing, right? So yeah, I'm trying to pop skills that will hit as many enemies at once as possible, so I can get rid of them, kind of.
Yeah.
But again, I was doing it, so I do think there it was a factor. It's an early build, so things aren't even fully patched or sort of balanced in a way that they're going to be for day one, really.
Right.
And I'm playing it on my own with just an NPC mercenary at my side. So I do think that there will be a difference. And I think you're right. You're probably on the right track that it's going to end up being in that way, where maybe it won't drop as quickly, the actual Realm Walker itself, but either way, I think they probably realize that those world bosses fell like water out of a cup sometimes, and they wanted to just extend the life of what that experience would be. So you're not in and out in less than 5 minutes. Like
Yeah.
there's always going to be people that on like day 2 of launch, they're going to find a way to make these things disappear in 2 seconds
I
and get
can't
through the
wait.
dungeon in 3 seconds. And that's
And
fine.
I'm gonna be on the sidelines as a cheerleader being like, "Okay, let's go, guys. Woo!
Go,
Open
Bob,
up the
go.
chest." Yeah,
Yay.
exactly. Yes, let's go.
You're gonna let Leroy Jenkins
That's it.
take it
That's
for you.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, yep.
Speaking of wow. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there was another thing I wanted to sort of bring up for it. I do think, regardless of what class you play, the content itself is still better than what it was before this expansion came along. Loot, the progression, like we were mentioning before, leveling, those things matter. I didn't get too far into the Paragon stuff, but there was more Paragon um,
Mhm.
nodes available. There's more legendary ones, I believe, is how they put it too. So like,
So I could be wrong, but I think to accommodate the increase in the level cap, there is one more Paragon board at the very
that's it.
end, and
Yes.
for each character, for each class and everything,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
within that, Paragon board, there is a legendary node. So you're
Yes.
essentially just
Yes.
getting accommodated for those extra 10 levels, which is great in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So all that stuff is there, which helps. There's added dungeons. I think that, I mean, the map is the same with the added area
Yeah.
as well. So if you haven't explored the whole map, you still have a chance to. It felt like there was a lot of hell tides popping up. There was definitely a lot of the realm walkers. Like there was lots to do. And I never felt like I was in one place the entire time, which was kind of fun.
Mhm.
The only other thing that I want to say that I was like, this is a slight nitpick, very slight, I would say, because really you're just trying to destroy them as you go. But there wasn't a lot of new enemies, I think. There was a lot of repeated ones as I played through it. So even in the new areas, there are some, but you don't really get to a lot of the new demons and enemies from my recollection until you're later into the story.
Yeah.
You get to the new area and it's like, oh, well, there's more of those little red demons that everybody knows what they look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's more of the slugs. There's more of the skeletons. It's like, okay, well, I've seen all these guys before. I want to tackle like the bosses are different or can be
Oh
different.
my God. Yeah.
Sure, fine. Elites can be different and stuff, but you didn't get to a lot of even smaller enemies until several hours in. And I was
Mhm.
sort of hoping the second we crossed that bridge, all of the enemies would be different, or at least the majority of them. And I would say 30% of them are different, which was a little bit disappointing. Either way, you're still popping off all your skills and you're still killing a bunch of elites and enemies and all that. All it doesn't change how you play. I just would have found it interesting to kind of, oh, how do I prepare for this enemy and how do I sort of, which skill should I use first against this guy? That didn't happen as often as I wanted it to. But again, also something that can change. They can
No,
definitely
totally.
they can definitely tweak that 100%. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of a small thing, I think, but it's something I noted.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered most of the stuff that I've wanted to talk about. I think
Yeah,
we're in a very good spot for Diablo, a year now removed from its first launch. I think this expansion does a really great job setting up a second year for the game.
yeah,
And I think, yeah, if anyone's curious about the expansion, I think that this does Vessel of Hatred adds in so much great like core AAA Bethesda or not Bethesda Blizzard content here that yeah you'd be silly not to jump in, especially if you had a great time with the core game. But I
hmm
think also if you're a little if you're like I'm not willing to really put in the 40 $50 or whatever for the expansion, there's still a whole bunch of great changes being made to the core game with this
yeah,
new season that I think you can still jump in with season 6, have a great time with the original classes. You're not going to be able to play the Spearborn, you're not going to go through the new story, the new region and stuff like that, but I think with an increased level cap, a great loot grind with the
yeah.
realm
New loot
walkers and stuff.
system. Yep.
I think there's still a great opportunity to jump in on October 7th and go and play this game because I've been looking for a reason to jump back in. I didn't want to tire myself out with this game with season 5, so I took a little bit of a
Yeah.
hiatus. But after
Yeah.
season 4, I was like, this has reached like maximum Diablo potential, and I just want an excuse to come back in. And this expansion is exactly that for me.
Yeah, and I kind of did that too. I did the early days of season
Okay.
5
Yep.
as kind of the return. I think I mean I did one for sure, and
Yep.
then like most
Me
of
too.
2, I would say,
Okay.
and then I didn't really come back until I guess it was in like May probably or April or something when season 5 started, and I did like, whatever, played it off and on for what 3 weeks or something like
Sure.
that, which was enough to get me into Paragon and blah blah blah. Anyways,
Okay.
um just enough to do the same thing. Give me that carrot, like you mentioned
Yep.
earlier. And I do think that this expansion is a classic example of an expansion. Full-fledged story, new class, new systems that are implemented across the board, new characters, new skills. The Paragon stuff is like all of this stuff is just it's a lot of content. Whether you're some of it you might not even notice, and that's the beauty of what they've created is that there's a lot of stuff behind this. Maybe you don't notice the loot because you haven't played the game in a year, and you're like, oh, well, this is cool. I'm getting a lot of new loot. I don't remember if that was great. Now you get new rewarding stuff to play around with. The choice of like, oh, do I use this ring or do I use that helm or this weapon or that weapon? Do I go one-handed or dual wielding? Like what do I do? And all that stuff is still there, just with more interesting loot that, yes, I mentioned earlier, I felt underpowered to start, but once it really started kicking in for whatever reason, I got lots of it and I had lots of choice and my
Yeah.
inventory was full and I was like, shit, what do I do? I like that. I like that. I like having like an abundance of riches, and that's exactly what they're doing here. And that's all going to be in the base game. So it's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think the biggest compliment I can give Vessel of Hatred is that it skews way more towards the Lord of Hatred expansion
Mm,
than Reaper of Souls. Because to me, Diablo 3, that expansion almost felt more accustomed to like DLC than an
yeah.
expansion. In my,
Yeah.
at least in my opinion, and maybe that's the just the time and place I was playing it. It didn't really feel like it enhanced the game all too much, but Lord of Hatred, like that was a revelation when that first came out back in like
Yeah.
the early 2000s. You're like, I'm getting I'm getting more of this, and it's like a
What's,
full story
what's,
expansion. There's so much emphasis on the
yeah.
gameplay and everything, and I feel like that's really what Vessel of Hatred has kind of encapsulated is its system is on a system level, it's expanding everything, but on a story and just meaningful progression of this game, that's exactly what you're getting here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I agree. Totally
Yeah.
agree. I think this is great. And everything we've said, if it is interesting to you and sounds like, oh yeah, that sounds about right, that might be enough to sort of pull the trigger on it. Spend your time and your money wherever you'd like. I'm gonna keep playing this. I find it great, even if I'm playing it solo. And yeah, Steve, I'll see you in Sanctuary, man. Let's kick some ass. Let's kick
I
some
love
demon
it.
ass. Let's
Let's
do it,
do it.
buddy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm locked and loaded for the full season. I cannot wait
Yeah,
for
me too. Me
just to
too.
do it all over again. Honestly, that I think I mean I can sort of complain and be like, oh well, none of our progression carries over and everything, but I'm kind of like now I can do it proper. Now I can do it right. Now I can take
Yeah.
my time with it, invest myself into this character. I'm in.
Yeah, and you know what? And the experience will be different because other people, random people or
Huge. Yep.
friends will be
Yep.
online. So I do think that fundamentally aspects of this game are different when there are other people on the map with you, or at least more people on the map with you. I do think that changes it and enhances a lot of your experience. So that is enough for me to even at least, even if it's one season that I play, for me it'll be worth it. So
Exactly.
yeah,
That's all I want. Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Dave, this has been great, a great chat. Where
yeah,
can
man.
people find your written review for Vessel of Hatred?
Consolecreatures.com, everybody. Written review on there, and just yeah, more reviews of a lot of indie games on there. A really like could be one of my favorite games of the year I played recently. An indie game that is a turn-based RPG, which completely blew me away, called Beyond Galaxy Land.
Hmm.
Check that review out. 100% one of my favorite games of the year right now. It's going to be up there and fighting for my top, 3 to 5 or something. I think. So check that out as well. Made by, I believe, just a solo guy as well. So lots of stuff on consolecreatures.com. Doing my best to kind of keep up with things as life is busy, but that's where you can find the review for Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred as well. And across the board online at Dave Petro. What about you, sir?
I'm found across the internet at Esfigvari. And yeah, we'll be back next week with another episode talking about games, talking about all the fun stuff. But until then, we appreciate you tuning in. And until next time, we'll see you. Bye.
Bye.